successful cartwheel to mark the occasion, something which normally filled me with bodily dread. But I didn't analyze the experience or chalk it up to anything more than simply the thrill of watching a live television event, with the cross-reference thought that, yes, perhaps I needed to get out more. The encounter would have passed me by entirely if it wasn't for the premiere, years later, of a little show on Netflix called The Crown. Watching it brought back something similar to what I experienced on Will and Kate's wedding day, an irresistible urge for personal improvement. There was something contagious in the way actress Claire Foy portrayed Elizabeth Windsor. Episode 1 had hardly finished, and I was already standing taller and conducting myself with more bodily grace and decorum. I stopped short at trying to learn the Queen's cut-glass accent. I totally didn't, but you get the picture. Apparently, watching the splendor of monarchy, even via dramatized miniseries, brought out the better, more polished side of me. I reckoned there were only two possible explanations. Either I'm a long-lost royal, simply acting out my natural destiny — I'd settle for Anastasia's 14th cousin — or I'm just a royal dweeb. Turns out, it was nothing so personal. With the hindsight of an entire book behind me, I can now say that I was simply an unconscious participant in a universal phenomenon affecting millions throughout history. Its roots lay in a fascinating blend of cultural anthropology, quasi-religious symbolism, and tribal magic. The ancient Greeks had a closely related word for the concept, kalokagathia, an ideal of personal grace and beauty believed to be the birthright of the high-born, which often inspired yearnings of excellence in lesser mortals. Watching the great and good stirs us to greater goodness. In other words, royalty tends to rub off on its spectators. And rather fantastically, the British monarchy is one of the last remaining institutions where you can still observe and experience kalokagathia in its purest form today. Royal researcher Jeremy Paxman calls it the benign influence of the crown, something that makes countless cynics drop a curtsy in front of the Queen and impels many more to stand bolt upright in their living rooms should Her Majesty appear on their television sets. Helen Mirren famously experienced the sensation during her Oscar-winning performance in the film The Queen. Brought up with staunch anti-monarchist tendencies, Mirren admitted to previously having a Sex Pistols attitude to the royal family, explaining it wasn't a world I was enamored with. Yet her on-screen role as Elizabeth II worked an inward alchemy, gradually transforming Mirren into a self-proclaimed queenist who felt no shame in shouting Elizabeth's praises to a bunch of equally bemused Americans on Oscar night. "I basically fell in love with her," said Mirren. Loyalists and scoffers alike have tried for decades to wrinkle out how and why this all works so successfully, how the crown, currently occupied by an unassuming grandmother barely over 5 feet tall with absolutely no political power, can exert such tremendous power where it counts most. Though most agree the mystery lies in the fact that the British crown is ultimately reflective and, for an unelected institution, far more representative than you might think. As writer Rebecca West once famously opined, to look upon the splendor of monarchy is to see magnified images of ourselves, but better, ourselves behaving well. A sentiment earlier echoed by the Times of 1936, the Queen has come to be the symbol of every side of life of this society, its universal representative in whom her people see their better selves ideally reflected. For Robert Lacey, royal historian for the Crown, kingship gives us a peek into the majesty of the ordinary man, which further explains why it is so oddly discombobulating when even minor royals misbehave. Logically, we shouldn't care, but we do because they are ultimately symbols of us. When some of them did badly, we did not like what we saw of ourselves, says historian William Shawcross.